All right, everyone, welcome back for another deep dive.
Yeah, glad to be back.
So I've been thinking a lot about accents and how they can completely throw me off when I'm listening to somebody.
Oh, yeah.
Like I find myself rewinding like 3 or 4 times, like, wait, what did they just say?
Right.
And it really makes you realize that like language is so much more than just the words themselves.
Absolutely.
It's like this whole symphony of sounds.
Hmm.
And today we're going to be taking a deep dive into some of the challenges that Korean speakers face when they're learning English.
Yeah, this should be interesting.
And we've got this fascinating excerpt here that talks about some of the specific pronunciation hurdles that they encounter.
Cool.
So let's just jump right in.
Okay.
So our source is focusing a lot on these vowel contrasts, specifically the difference between E and S, so like seat versus sit,
Yeah, those are tricky.
and then we versus, so think like pool versus pull.
Hmm.
And I mean, just saying those out loud, I can already see how those would be tough to master.
Yeah, and to a native English speaker, they seem so obvious.
Right.
But for someone coming from a language like Korean, where those subtle distinctions just don't exist, it's a whole different ballgame.
So what is it about the Korean language specifically that makes these sounds so tricky?
Well, English and Korean have very different vowel systems. Korean has a simpler vowel system with fewer distinct vowel sounds.
Uh-huh.
And so when a Korean speaker encounters these English vowels that are so close together, their ear isn't really trained to pick up on those nuances. It's
Hmm.
kind of like imagine a painter who's only ever worked with a limited palette of colors. You
I
know,
like that.
they can create beautiful things, but when they try to recreate a masterpiece that's full of all these subtle shades and hues,
Yeah,
some of those details might get lost.
that's a great analogy.
So it's similar with language. If your native language doesn't have certain sounds, it's like your brain hasn't developed the tools to really distinguish them.
Okay, so we've got this painter who's missing some colors in their palette,
Yeah.
and that's kind of like what's happening with Korean speakers trying to learn English.
Mm.
So what does that actually look like in real life? Like what kind of problems does this create for them?
Well, it can lead to all sorts of misunderstandings. Imagine trying to have a conversation and you're not sure if someone said ship or sheep or
Oh,
leave or leave.
wow, yeah, that could cause some serious confusion.
Yeah, and it can be incredibly frustrating for the learner too, They
Okay.
know what they want to say,
Yeah.
but they just can't quite get their mouth to make the right sound.
That's got to be so discouraging.
Oh, absolutely. And this isn't unique to Korean speakers. This happens all the time in language learning whenever you have two languages that have really different sound systems.
Yeah, this is actually reminding me of my own attempts at learning Mandarin.
Oh, yeah.
Like, no matter how much I practice those tones, I just cannot seem to get them right.
Tone languages are tough.
Oh, they're brutal. And it's so embarrassing because I know I sound ridiculous.
Well, I'm sure you're doing better than you think.
Oh, I don't know about that, but I'm trying.
That's all that matters.
So we've talked about these vowel contrasts, but
Mhm.
are there other pronunciation challenges that Korean speakers face with English?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the big ones is consonant clusters.
Like what?
So these are groups of consonants that are pronounced together, like the strike in street or the splelel in splash.
Okay, huh?
And Korean doesn't really have those kinds of consonant clusters, so it can be really difficult for Korean speakers to produce them.
Right.
It's like they're trying to cram too many sounds into one syllable.
Like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole.
Exactly.
So what about like the musicality of language, the rise and fall of our voices?
Oh, intonation.
Yes.
Yeah, that's another area where Korean and English differ significantly.
Okay.
English uses intonation a lot to convey, meaning, think about how your voice goes up at the end of a question,
Hmm.
or how you might emphasize certain words to change the tone of a sentence.
Right.
But Korean has a much flatter intonation pattern.
Uh-huh.
So even if a Korean speaker has perfect grammar, their speech might sound a bit monotone to an English speaker.
Yeah. It's like reading a book without any punctuation.
Yeah.
You get the basic information, but you lose all the emotion and the nuance.
Exactly.
Man, this is all really making me appreciate just how complex language is.
Oh, it's incredibly complex, and it's so much more than just memorizing words and grammar rules.
Right.
It's about understanding the whole system of sounds and how they work together to create meaning.
It's like learning a whole new way of using your voice.
Hmm.
So to all of our listeners out there, next time you hear someone struggling with English pronunciation, just remember that they're not just learning new words.
Yeah,
They're learning a whole new way of speaking.
absolutely.
And it's hard,
Yeah,
really hard.
it is.
So be patient, be encouraging.
Mm-hmm.
A
Yeah.
little bit of kindness can go a long way.
And it's not just about English either.
Oh, that's true.
I mean, think about your own native language. Are there any sounds that you struggle with or words that you've always mispronounced?
Oh, definitely. I'm sure we all have our little quirks.
Yeah, and sometimes those quirks can even become part of our identity, like a regional accent.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that we're all language learners in our own way.
I love that takeaway. I think that's a great note to end on.
Yeah.
So thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of language learning. It's been fascinating.
Yeah, always a pleasure.
And we'll see you next time.
See you then.